You enjoy history, you admire things miscellaneous, you're a collector of strange facts, and you have found a home. You are at the Book of Days Project, where we are reading from Robert Chambers' The Book of Days, and today is February 17th, and I shall tell you of some certain odds and ends associated with this day in history as seen through the eyes of a 19th century Scotsman. February 17th, born Francis Duke of Guise, French warrior in 1519. Horace Benedict de Saussure, a Genovese traveler in 1740, was born. Dead on this day, two famous Italians, Michelangelo Buonarroti, painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, in 1563. Giordano Bruno, Neapolitan philosopher, burnt at Rome in 1600. Also dead on this day, Jean-Baptiste Poquelin Moliere, 1673, in Paris. It is the feast day of Saints Theodulus and Julian, martyrs in Palestine, in 309. It is also the feast day of Saint Flavian, Archbishop of Constantinople, not Istanbul, martyred in Lydia, in 449. It is also the feast day of Saint Sylvia of Auchy, a bishop, 718, dead. Moliere, dead on this day. France, having Moliere for one of her sons, may be said to have given birth to the greatest purely comic writer of modern times. Born the son of a humble valet de chambre and tapissier in Paris in 1620, this singular genius pressed through all the trammels and difficulties of his situation to education and the exercise of that dramatic art in which he was to attain such excellence. The theater was new in the French capital, and he at once raised it to glory. His Étourdi, his Précieux Ridicule, his Menteur, his Tartuffe, his Femmes Savantes. What a brilliant series they constitute. The list is closed by the Malade Imaginaire, which came before the world when the poor author was sick in earnest, dying indeed of a chest complaint, accompanied by spitting of blood. On the third night of this representation, he was advised not to play, not to act, but he resolved to make the effort, and it cost him his life. He was carried home, dying to his house in the Rue Richelieu, and there soon breathed his last, choked with a gush of blood in the arms of two strange priests who happened to lodge in the same house. It was maliciously reported by prejudiced people that Moliere had expired when in the net of a counterfeiting death in his idol on the stage, and this made it the more difficult to obtain for him the Christian burial usually denied to players, actors, that is. His widow flew to the king, exclaiming against the priesthood, but was glad to make very humble representations to the Archbishop of Paris, and to stretch a point regarding Moliere's wish for religious consolations, in order to have the remains of her husband treated decently. On it being shown that he had indeed received the sacrament at the preceding Easter, the Archbishop was pleased to permit that this glory of France should be inhumed without any pomp, with two priests only, and with no church solemnities. The revolutionists, in the late 18th century, more just, transferred the remains of this great comedian from the little chapel where they were first deposited to the Museum of French Monuments. Monsieur Galland, our next century. The English people, who for generations have enjoyed that most attractive book, The Arabian Nights entertainments, know in general very little of its origin. The Western world received it from the hands of a French savant of the 17th century, who obtained it in its original form during a residence in the East. That would be from the hands of Antoine Galland, who was born of poor parents in 1646, and showed such talents in early life that he not only obtained a finished education, but received an appointment as attaché to the French embassy at Constantinople, not Istanbul. While still a young man, he devoted himself to Oriental travel, the collection of Oriental literature, and the study of Eastern authors. But of all of his laborious works, little memory survives, while his light task of translating the Mille et Une Nuits, 1001 Nights, has ensured him a kind of immortality. In the first editions of this work, the translator preserved the whole of the repetitions respecting Scheherazade and her vigilant sister, which the quick-witted French found insufferably tedious, that being the repetition of the wakening of Scheherazade from each and every one of the 1001 nights in which the tales were told. It was resolved by some young men that they would try to make Galland feel how stupid were these endless wakenings. Coming in the middle of a cold January night to his house in the Faubourg Saint-Jacques, they began to cry vehemently for Monsieur Galland. He speedily appeared upon the balcony, dressed only in his robe de chambre and his nightcap, and in great anger at this inopportune disturbance. "Have I the honor," said one of the youths, "to speak to Monsieur Galland, the celebrated Monsieur Galland, the learned translator of the Mille et Une Nuits?" "I am he, at your service, gentlemen," cried the savant, shivering from top to toe. "Ah, then, Monsieur Galland, if you are not asleep, I pray you, while the day is about to break, that you will tell us one of those pleasant stories which you so well know." The hint was taken, and the tiresome formula of the awakening of the Sultaness was suppressed in all but the very first few nuits. Moving on to de Saussure's ascent of Mont Blanc. Monsieur de Saussure was a Genovese professor who distinguished himself in the latter part of the 18th century by his researches in the natural history of the Alps. Previous to de Saussure's time, there had been scarcely any such bold idea entertained as that the summit of Mont Blanc could be reached by human foot. Under his prompting, a few guides made the attempt on several occasions, but without success. The difficulty lay in the necessity of undergoing the whole exertion required within the time between two indulgences in repose, for there was no place where, in ascending or descending, the shelter necessary for sleep could be obtained. The case might well appear the more hopeless when the extraordinary courage and power of exertion and endurance that belonged to the Alpine guides were considered. If they generally regarded the enterprise as impossible, who then might attempt it? Nevertheless, a now and favorable route having been discovered and a hut for shelter during an intermediate night having been prepared, Saussure attempted an ascent in September 1785. Having spent a night at the hut, the party set out the next morning with great confidence to ascend the remaining 1,000 toises along the ridge called the Aiguille des Gouttes, and they had advanced a considerable way when the depth of the fresh-fallen snow proved an insurmountable barrier. A second attempt was made de Saussure in June 1786, and though it failed, it led to the discovery by a guide named Jacques Balmat of a preferable route, which proved to be the only one at all practicable. Unfortunately, de Saussure, who from his persevering efforts deserved to be the conqueror of Mont Blanc, was anticipated in the honor by a gentleman named Paccard, to whom Balmat imparted his secret, and who under Balmat's guidance gained the summit of the mountain in August of the last named year, 1786. It was not until August of 1787, and after a successful second attempt by Balmat, in company with two other guides, that de Saussure finally accomplished the object, and on this occasion he had a tent carried in which he might take a night's rest at whatever place should prove suitable. You can go to a Book of Days Project, blogspot.com, to see a illustration of this ascent. De Saussure spent the first night on the top of a comparatively small mountain called the Côte near Chamonix. The second was passed in an excavation in the snow on what was called the second plateau with a tent for a covering. On the third day, the party set out at an angle of 39 degrees up a snow or ice slope, and at 11 o'clock they gained the summit after suffering incredible inconvenience from the heat and the rarity of the air. He wrote, "My first looks," says he, "were directed on Chamonix, where I knew my wife and her two sisters were, their eyes fixed to a telescope, following all our stops with an uneasiness too great without doubt, but no less disturbing to them. I felt a very pleasing and consoling sentiment when I saw the flag which they had promised to hoist the moment they observed me at the summit, when their apprehensions would at last be suspended. Now, scarcely a season passes, but some enterprising Englishman performs this once almost fabulous feat." You can reference Percy Bysshe Shelley for his poem on Mont Blanc. Happy trails, Book of Days, people.